Imagine you're the undisputed leader of like the most fearsome, highly mobile, and just terrifyingly fast army on the planet.
Right.
Your troops are practically born in the saddle. And you've just suffered this completely unforgivable diplomatic insult from a neighboring empire.
A massive insult, yeah.
So you're marching out for absolute unmitigated revenge. But what is your opening move?
That's the crazy part.
Right. You intentionally lose a battle. You order your fierce warriors to look haggard and weak and pathetic as they retreat. I mean, you actively choose to look like a complete failure.
Which is just, it's totally backwards.
It makes absolutely no sense, right?
Yeah.
Why would the ultimate master of speeds start a war by deliberately slowing down and faking weakness?
Well, I mean, it completely violates our fundamental intuition about how conflict works.
Yeah.
We are conditioned to think that if you have an advantage, like, overwhelming speed or force, you should just use it immediately and aggressively.
Hit them as hard as you can.
Exactly. But what that completely misses is the entire psychological dimension of warfare.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. True speed isn't just about moving fast physically. It's about moving in a way that your opponent's brain physically cannot process.
Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're tearing apart the philosophy and the literal, real-world application of the Blitzkrieg strategy.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. And we're not just looking at this as some, dusty military history lesson for you to memorize.
Right, not at all.
We're going to decode how this exact same mechanical principle of weaponized speed actually bypasses human resistance. Whether you're talking about ancient cavalry or a heavyweight boxing match, or even, like, negotiating a contract in a modern boardroom.
And it's a really critical concept for right now, because if you look around, we're basically living in a paradox.
How so?
Well, everyone is moving frantically, right? We're all drowning in this constant flood of instant communication and instant notifications.
Oh, yeah, impossible deadlines everywhere.
Exactly. We feel like we're sprinting at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Yet, ironically, we act with this extreme, almost paralyzing caution.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. You're bombarded with emails all day.
Right.
But when it actually comes time to make a major decision or take a massive leap, what's the default human response in, like, a corporate environment?
We completely freeze.
We freeze. We form a committee.
Yeah.
We say, let me circle back to you on that after I've reviewed the data.
Classic circle back.
Right. We're running to exhaustion on a treadmill, but we're staying entirely stationary. It's this illusion of speed masking a really deep underlying hesitation.
And that hesitation makes us incredibly vulnerable. Because the pace of daily existence is so full of friction and noise, we unconsciously try to protect our cognitive bandwidth.
Right, we get overwhelmed.
Yeah, so we erect these massive psychological walls around ourselves just to slow the world down. We build a rigid defense.
It's like living inside a besieged fortress.
That's a great way to put it.
You pull up the drawbridge just to get through your inbox.
Yeah.
But what we're going to explore today is how someone who truly understands the mechanics of speed can absolutely shatter that fortress.
Completely dismantle it.
Right. We're talking about an underlying philosophy articulated over 2,000 years ago by the Chinese strategist Sun Tzu. He essentially argued that the supreme consideration in any conflict is speed, striking where the enemy is completely unprepared.
And by routes they think are impossible.
Exactly. But we really have to define what speed actually means in this context, don't we?
We do, because it's not simply velocity.
Right.
It's not just running from point A to point B faster than the other guy. It's about the cognitive load you place on your opponent.
The cognitive load.
Yeah. When you understand the biological and psychological mechanism of decision-making under pressure, you realize that static defenses almost always fail.
Let's actually get into the biology of that for a second.
Sure.
Because if we're talking about bypassing the brain's ability to process, we're really talking about interrupting the cognitive cycle, right?
Precisely. In any high-stakes situation, your brain goes through this continuous loop.
Okay.
First, you observe your environment. Then you orient yourself to the new reality. Then you decide on a course of action. And finally, you act.
Right. The Odia loop, basically.
Exactly. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical planning part of your brain, needs a specific window of time to run future simulations and pick the best option.
So what happens when reality changes faster than my brain can actually run that simulation?
Your brain essentially hits a fatal error.
Wow.
Yeah. If someone strikes with suddenness and unpredictability, they interrupt your cycle before you've even finished orienting.
So you're just stuck.
Completely stuck. Your prefrontal cortex gets completely overloaded. Biology takes over at that point.
The fight-or-flight response.
Exactly. Your body dumps cortisol and adrenaline into your system, and control is handed over to the amygdala.
The primitive emotional center of the brain.
Right. You drop out of logic entirely, and you just fall into pure emotion. You panic. You freeze.
And an emotional, panicked opponent makes massive, unforced errors.
Always.
I want to look at exactly how that cognitive collapse looks on a massive scale.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's go to the beginning of World War II. The 1940 German invasion of France and the Low Countries.
This is a perfect example.
This is literally where the term Blitzkrieg lightning war was coined, right?
It is.
Right.
It's the ultimate example of the rigid defense meeting true cognitive speed.
Mm-hmm.
The Allies had built their entire philosophy around the lessons of World War I.
Which was very static.
Exactly. They expected a static war of attrition, millions of men grinding it out in trenches. So they built these heavily fortified defensive lines.
Like the Maginot Line.
Right. And they expected the attack to come through the wide, flat plains of central Belgium.
Because that was the logical, traditional route.
Exactly.
But the Germans completely bypass that. They find the weak point, which happens to be the Ardennes forest.
Yeah.
Now, I have to push back a little here because saying they found a weak point sounds easy.
It wasn't.
Militarily, the Ardennes was considered completely impassable for a modern armored division. We're talking about dense, ancient woods, incredibly steep ravines, and these narrow, winding dirt roads.
Right.
The French High Command literally looked at the map and said, tanks cannot go through there.
And that assumption is exactly what made it the perfect route.
Because they ignored it.
Yeah, because the French deemed it impassable, it was barely guarded.
Wow.
The Germans didn't just find a physical weak point. They found a massive blind spot in the Allies' cognitive map of the war.
But physically, how did they pull it off?
It was tough.
I mean, moving tens of thousands of vehicles through a dense forest isn't just some psychological trick. It's a terrifying logistical nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
I've read accounts of that crossing, and it was a massive traffic jam. Vehicles were backed up for miles, bumper to bumper. If the Allies had just flown a few reconnaissance planes over the forest, they would have seen the biggest, most vulnerable target in military history.
You're entirely right. It was a massive gamble.
Yeah.
But the Germans understood momentum. They pushed through day and night. And because the French were so convinced nothing could come through the forest, they didn't prioritize aerial reconnaissance in that sector.
They just didn't even look.
Exactly. By the time the German armored spearhead broke out of the trees and crossed the Meuse River, the psychological shock was total.
And this is where the communication breakdown becomes so fascinating.
Yeah.
It wasn't just that the French didn't have tanks or troops to fight back. It was that their entire bureaucratic system of command was too slow to process the new reality.
Exactly. The French military infrastructure was completely tethered to the past.
Right.
They were highly suspicious of radio communication because they feared interception.
Okay, so what did they use?
They relied heavily on physical telephone lines
Mm.
and dispatch riders on motorcycles.
Wait, they were fighting a mechanized tank invasion using guys on motorcycles delivering paper envelopes?
Yes,
That's insane.
it is. And when the German tanks broke through, one of the first things that happens in the chaos is that telephone lines get cut or abandoned.
Oh, of course.
So imagine you're a French general miles behind the front line. A dispatch rider finally reaches you with a report that German tanks are at a certain bridge.
Okay.
It takes you hours to consult your maps, form a committee with other commanders, decide on a counterattack, write out the orders, and send a rider back out.
But by the time the rider gets back to the front with the order, 48 hours have passed.
Exactly.
The German tanks aren't at the bridge anymore. They're 30 miles down the road, completely behind your lines.
Right.
The order you just issued is literally referencing a reality that no longer exists.
That's the essence of the Blitzkrieg. The Germans overwhelmed the decision-making apparatus of an entire nation.
Wow.
The French commanders were paralyzed because every piece of data they received was already obsolete by the time they analyzed it.
That is terrifying.
It really is.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates an observation made by the ancient Greek historian Xenophon.
Oh, what did he say?
He wrote, "The less a thing is foreseen, the more fright does it cause.
The less a thing is foreseen.
Yeah.
It's not the tank itself that causes the terror. It's the tank appearing in your rearview mirror when you thought you were completely safe.
Right.
It completely strips away your agency.
Right. When your understanding of what is physically possible is violently contradicted, your cognitive structure just collapses.
Okay, but this begs a huge question.
Sure.
If you are the one trying to execute this strategy, how do you do it without just rushing blindly?
That's the trick.
Right, because if I try to move that fast, I'm probably going to trip over my own feet, outrun my supply lines, and end up in total chaos. So how do you actually harness that kind of speed?
That's the great paradox here.
Okay.
To wield terrifying, unpredictable speed, you first have to master the art of deliberate slowness.
Deliberate slowness.
Yes. You have to set a trap. And to see the absolute masterclass in this, we have to look at the greatest military surprise in human history.
I love this part.
We're going back to the year 1218, and we're looking at Genghis Khan's campaign against Muhammad II, the Shah of Khwarizm.
The scale of this history is just staggeringly cinematic.
Oh, it's epic.
We really need to paint the picture of what's at stake here. In 1218, the Shah isn't just some minor local warlord.
Not at all.
His empire is unimaginably vast. It covers present-day Iran, stretching across Afghanistan and deep into Central Asia.
Massive territory.
And his capital city, Samarkand, is one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. It's a huge hub of trade, culture, and military might. The Shah is at the absolute apex of global power.
He was entirely secure in his dominance. He felt completely invincible.
Yeah.
And initially, his relationship with the Mongols was purely economic.
They were just trading.
Right. Genghis Khan wanted to reopen the Silk Road for trade, and the Shah agreed. It was highly profitable for both sides. But the inciting incident that sparks this apocalyptic clash happens in a frontier city called Otrar.
Right, so a Mongol trade caravan arrives in Otrar, and they're carrying a fortune in luxury goods.
A literal fortune.
The local governor of Otrar looks at these merchants and decides, purely out of greed and paranoia, that they must be spies.
Yeah.
So he massacres the entire caravan and seizes all the goods for himself.
And when word of this reaches Genghis Khan, his initial response is actually incredibly measured, which really surprises people who only know his reputation for brutality.
Right. He doesn't just attack instantly.
No. He dispatches a diplomatic envoy to the Shah, demanding an apology and asking that the governor of Otrar be handed over for punishment.
But there's a subtle diplomatic nuance here that deeply offends the Shah, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Genghis Khan's demand presumes that he and the Shah are equals. And the Shah, sitting in his fabulously wealthy palace, finds the very idea insulting.
Of course he does.
To him, the Mongols are just dirty nomads living in tents. So his response is swift and absolute. He has the primary Mongol ambassador publicly beheaded, and he mutilates the faces of the accompanying envoys before sending them back.
Which is the ultimate diplomatic point of no return.
Absolutely.
You don't chop off an ambassador's head and expect trade negotiations to continue. War is entirely inevitable now.
Yeah.
But look at the Shah's posture. He isn't sweating. He isn't panicking.
He's incredibly confident.
He looks at his military assets, and he has a standing army of over 400,000 highly trained troops.
Wow.
Including a massive Turkish cavalry. He outnumbers the Mongols significantly.
And he trusts his geography. He sets up the ultimate rigid defense.
Just like the French.
It's the exact same psychological trap they fell into with the Maginot Line. He looks at the map and sees a massive natural fortress. To the east is the Syr Dar'ya River, spanning 500 miles. To the north is the Kizilkum Desert, which is universally accepted as completely impassable for an army.
Totally uncrossable.
And to the west is the Amu Darya River.
So he uses logic. He assumes the Mongols have to attack from the east across the Syr Dar'ya River because that's the only route that makes logistical sense.
Right.
So he stretches his massive army along the river to create this unbreakable defensive wall. He keeps his elite reserves back near his wealthy cities so he can plug any holes in the line. He's basically sitting in a lawn chair behind a fortress saying, "Come and get me."
But he fundamentally miscalculates the nature of his enemy.
How so?
Well, Genghis Khan commands what is arguably the fastest army on Earth, but historically, nomadic speed was chaotic.
Right. Good for raiding, bad for conquering.
Exactly. It was great for raiding, but hard to use for strategic empire-toppling conquest.
Yeah.
Genghis Khan's true genius was adopting ancient Chinese strategic principles, specifically a tempo we can call slow, slow, quick, quick.
Slow, slow, quick, quick, quick.
Yeah, to turn that chaotic speed into something disciplined, predictable, and utterly devastating.
Let's break down that tempo. The first phase is the slow, meticulous preparation. While the Shah is sitting comfortably behind his river, Genghis Khan is quietly preparing to break the laws of physics. We know from the historical records that the Mongols captured a specific local guide, a man who knew the secret hidden chain of tiny oases stretching across that impassable Kizilkum desert.
Right.
They are spending months quietly laying the groundwork for the impossible.
Then comes the second slow, which is the lull, the setup.
Right.
The entire goal of this phase is to infect the enemy with a sleepy, arrogant attitude.
Make them overconfident.
Exactly. In the summer of 1219, a vanguard of Mongol scouts approaches the southern end of the Syr Dar'ya River, moving through the Fergana Valley. The Shah's son, Jalaluddin, rides out with a massive force to intercept them. They engage in a fierce clash.
And this brings us back to that crazy opening scenario we talked about.
Right.
The Mongols lose. They break and run. Jalaluddin rides back to his father and says, "These guys are a joke. They looked exhausted. Their horses were starving, and they had zero fighting spirit. We crushed them."
But it was a performance.
Yeah.
A completely deliberate, orchestrated defeat.
I have to stop and marvel at the leadership required to pull that off.
It's astounding.
If you're leading a hyper-aggressive, fiercely proud warrior culture on a campaign of blood revenge, how do you look your generals in the eye and say, okay, our first move is to go out there, take a beating, and run away looking like cowards?
Yeah.
Doesn't that risk completely destroying the morale of your own men?
It's an immense risk, and it's why so few leaders can actually pull this off.
Right.
But Genghis Khan understood that warfare is primarily a psychological endeavor. Unorganized speed is predictable.
Okay.
If they just charged the river, the Shah's massive army would have eventually ground them down.
Just by sheer numbers.
Exactly. By utilizing deliberate slowness, by staging that defeat, Genghis Khan gave the Shah exactly what he wanted to see. It completely validated the Shah's arrogance.
He fed the Shah's confirmation bias.
Exactly. The Shah heard the report and thought, I was right. They're beneath me. He lowered his guard. He stopped actively worrying about the Mongols maneuvering and just settled into his static defense.
Wow.
This perfectly illustrates Napoleon's famous maxim, you must be slow in deliberation and swift in execution.
The slowness is the anesthetic you use before you amputate the limb.
Precisely.
Okay, the trap is beautifully set. The Shah is overconfident, stationary, and emotionally completely unprepared for reality.
Completely unprepared.
Now the tempo shifts violently. Now we enter the quick phase.
It begins with the first quick, designed entirely to fix the enemy's attention and create overwhelming panic in the wrong direction.
And distraction.
Yes. A Mongol battalion suddenly materializes in the north and attacks Otrar.
This is the city where the massacre happened.
Right.
And they move so fast that the garrison is completely stunned. They capture the governor, the guy who started this whole mess. And the way they kill him is gruesome, but it serves a very specific psychological purpose.
It does.
They execute him by pouring molten silver into his eyes and ears. It's not just revenge for the stolen silver, it's a broadcast of absolute terror to the rest of the empire.
And it worked. The Shah hears about this sudden, horrific strike in the north, and he reacts exactly how Genghis Khan mathematically predicted he would.
Which is?
He panics about his northern flank and shifts more of his troops up the river to reinforce that static line.
But the second he shifts his weight, the trap springs.
Right.
2 more Mongol armies, led by his greatest generals, Jochi and Jebe, sweep south from Otrar. They move parallel to the river. Let's look at Jochi first. He commands a relatively small force, maybe 20,000 men.
Not huge.
But they swarm through the river towns like a plague of locusts. They hit a fort, burn it to the ground, vanish, and strike another town miles away before the Shah's troops can even saddle their horses to respond.
It's pure chaos. And while Jochi is tearing up the river line and keeping all the Shah's troops running around in circles, General Jebe's army simply vanishes.
As they just disappear.
They ride south and drop completely off the map.
We have to take a detour right here to talk about the physical anatomy of Mongol speed.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Because you read these historical accounts, and it sounds like magic. How are they moving tens of thousands of men across vast distances faster than the Shah can even send a messenger?
The logistics are mind-blowing.
Right. First, it's an all-cavalry army. No foot soldiers to slow the pace. But more importantly, no supply wagons.
And that's the tether that held every other army back.
Exactly.
If you have to feed 100,000 men, you need thousands of heavy wagons full of grain and supplies.
Which are so slow.
Wagons require flat roads, they break down, and they move at a walking pace. The Mongols severed that tether entirely.
How did they survive?
They carried their sustenance with them in the form of their herds. They drank the milk of their mares on the move. When they were in harsh terrain without water, they would make a small incision in the horse's vein, drink a few mouthfuls of blood to survive, and then patch the vein.
It's brutal, but incredibly efficient.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just one horse per rider either. Every single warrior had a string of remounts trailing behind him, sometimes 4 or 5 riderless mares.
Right.
When the horse they were riding started to fatigue, they wouldn't even stop. They would literally leap from the saddle of the tired horse onto a fresh one while maintaining a full gallop.
Incredible.
They could keep up a relentless, terrifying pace for days on end, sleeping in the saddle.
Their entire material culture was optimized for fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
Their marksmanship was legendary. They could shoot arrows with lethal accuracy backwards while actively retreating, making it deadly to chase them.
Right, the famous Parthian shot.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And consider their armor. Instead of heavy steel plate or restrictive chainmail, they wore thick shirts made of tightly woven raw silk.
I found the biological mechanics of those silk shirts fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
When an arrow hits a regular soldier, it pierces the flesh, the barb catches, and you have to stop and perform horrific battlefield surgery to cut it out.
Right.
But because silk is so incredibly strong and the weave is so tight, when an enemy arrow struck a Mongol rider, it usually didn't pierce the fabric. The arrowhead would push the silk into the wound, wrapping the fabric around the barb.
Which means the warrior didn't have to stop fighting.
Yes, he could reach into his shirt, pull firmly on the silk fabric, and the arrow would be cleanly extracted from the wound because the barb was entirely encased in the silk.
That is wild.
They could pull arrows out of their own bodies while riding at top speed.
And all of this chaotic movement was intensely coordinated.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have radios, but they commanded armies across hundreds of unmapped miles using a complex system of black and white signal flags during the day and synchronized torches at night.
So they moved like a single massive organism.
Exactly. So back to the battlefield. Jochi has the Shah completely distracted along the river. The Shah is exhausting his men trying to swat at these constantly moving raiders.
Oh.
Then comes the final, quick, the unanticipated fatal blow.
Okay.
General Jebe's army, the one that vanished to the south, they suddenly reappear, moving northwest directly into the vulnerable heart of the empire.
The Shah realizes the danger and throws his absolute best troops at them.
Yeah.
He sends his final reserve force, 50,000 elite, highly trained soldiers, to crush Jebe. And in the Shah's mind, he's remembering that first battle in the Fergana Valley.
He still thinks they're weak.
Exactly. He still thinks the Mongols are weak in a direct fight. He thinks his 50,000 fresh men are going to easily mop them up.
But the lull is over.
Right.
There is no deliberate slowness this time.
Mm-hmm.
The Mongols unleash absolute, suffocating hell.
They use psychological and environmental warfare simultaneously. They start firing arrows dipped in burning tar, creating these massive, choking black smoke screens across the battlefield.
Terrifying.
Under the cover of this blinding smoke, the heavy cavalry bursts through the lines, and they have these light supply chariots darting back and forth behind their own archers, constantly handing out fresh bundles of arrows.
Right.
The barrage literally never stops. The sky goes dark with arrows. Jebe's army utterly annihilates the Shah's 50,000 elite reserves.
The rigid defense is shattered.
Completely.
The Shah realizes his entire strategy has collapsed.
Yeah.
His only logical option is to abandon his defensive line, retreat deep into his territory far to the west, and try to slowly draft a new army.
But as the Shah is literally packing his bags in his capital, the climax of the entire multi-year strategy arrives.
This is the best part.
An army commanded by Genghis Khan himself appears out of thin air, standing outside the gates of Bukhara, deep in the west, completely behind the Shah's lines.
And the Shah and his generals are paralyzed from cognitive dissonance.
But they can't process it.
They are looking at their maps, and what they are seeing in front of them is mathematically impossible.
Right.
To be outside the gates of Bukhara, Genghis Khan would have had to march an entire army across the Kizilkum Desert.
Which everyone knew was a death sentence.
Exactly.
But remember that guide they captured years ago during the meticulous, slow preparation phase?
Mm-hmm.
They had quietly used him to navigate that hidden chain of tiny oases. They had crossed the uncrossable ocean of sand.
The historical accounts capture the psychological devastation perfectly.
What do they say?
Witnesses said it was as if the devil himself had conjured them up.
Wow.
This wasn't just a lost battle. It was an event that broke their understanding of reality. When you do the impossible, your enemy's will to fight just evaporates.
Yeah.
Within days, the great city of Bukhara surrenders. Then Samarkand falls.
He was cascades.
The Shah's generals panic and abandon him. The Shah himself flees with a tiny bodyguard. He spends months running for his life, pursued relentlessly by Mongol riders, until he finally dies of starvation, dressed in rags, hiding on an abandoned island in the Caspian Sea.
Unbelievable.
The wealthiest empire in the East, completely dismantled by the physics of speed.
I know there's a philosophical framework you want to apply to this because it's not just about horses and arrows.
Right. If we look at the ancient Chinese text, the I Ching, there's a profound concept that captures this perfectly.
Oh, I'm curious.
It's the hexagram called Chen, which translates to the arousing, or shock, or thunder.
Thunder.
Yeah. The text describes a movement so violent and sudden that it arouses absolute terror bursting forth from the earth. The judgment of the hexagram states, the shock terrifies for 100 miles.
Wow.
Genghis Khan's true weapon wasn't the bow, it was the psychological terror of the utterly unpredictable.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Okay.
We've spent a lot of time talking about vast empires, hundreds of thousands of troops, and crossing literal deserts. But how does this exact same mechanical principle work on an individual biological level?
That's a great question.
Can you apply the philosophy of bypassing the brain's processing speed in a one-on-one confrontation? Let's leave the 13th century and step into a brightly lit boxing ring in the 1960s.
Right.
Let's look at one of the greatest athletes in human history, Muhammad Ali.
Ali is the perfect micro-study of this philosophy.
Yes, he is.
Because if you look at the raw, physical metrics of Ali, specifically early in his career when he was fighting as Cassius Clay, he actually possessed a very significant limitation.
What was it?
Boxing historians and analysts universally agreed that, for a heavyweight, he had remarkably low raw punching power.
Right. He wasn't George Foreman?
No.
He wasn't Joe Frazier or Mike Tyson. He didn't have that sledgehammer, bone-crushing, one-hit power.
Exactly.
And yet, look at the historical statistics. In his first 20 professional fights, he scored 17 knockouts.
It's wild.
He even scored a devastating, legendary one-punch knockout against Sonny Liston, who was considered one of the most intimidating, durable fighters alive. How does a guy with below-average power knock out the toughest men on the planet with a single punch?
The analysis provided by boxing experts like Jose Torres and Burt Randolph Sugar answers this beautifully.
What did they find?
They concluded that Ali's genius wasn't in the weight of his fist, but in his total, complete mastery of speed and timing.
Speed and timing.
Yeah. He didn't overpower his opponent's physical mass. He short-circuited their nervous systems.
I want to break down the actual biology of a knockout to understand this.
Sure.
Because a knockout isn't just about pain, it's a mechanical failure of the brain, right?
Exactly. When a fighter sees a punch coming, even a fraction of a millisecond before it lands, their visual cortex processes the threat.
Okay.
The brain immediately fires electrical signals down the brainstem to the muscles in the neck, jaw, and shoulders, commanding them to lock up and tense.
To brace for impact.
Right. That bracing mechanism is the body's natural shock absorber. It prevents the head from snapping back violently, which is what causes the brain to slosh against the inside of the skull and trigger the shutdown sequence we call a knockout.
So Ali's entire strategy was to launch his punches with such extreme, blinding quickness that the fist physically arrived at the opponent's jaw before their optic nerve could actually send the warning signal to the brain.
Yes. He bypassed their sense of anticipation.
Wow.
He hit them during the latency period of their own nervous system.
Let me try an analogy to make this really visceral for anyone listening.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you are walking down a perfectly lit, totally empty hallway in an office building.
Okay.
You feel completely safe, your muscles are relaxed. Suddenly, as you walk past a solid wooden door, someone on the other side kicks it open, and the heavy door swings violently outward, hitting you square in the face.
That's a perfect example.
Now, that door isn't moving at the speed of sound, it's just moving at the speed of a normal door opening. But because it was completely flush with the wall and your eyes didn't perceive the threat, your brain never sent the signal to your neck muscles to tense up.
You're completely defenseless.
Exactly. You take the entire kinetic force of that heavy wood with absolutely zero bodily defense. It drops you instantly to the floor. As the boxing experts conclude, it is not the hardest punch that knocks you out. It is a punch you don't see coming.
Ali's fists were the Mongol cavalry crossing the Kizilkum Desert.
That is such a cool connection.
He arrived at the target before the opponent's mind could even register that a defense was necessary. By overwhelming their visual processing speed, he rendered their muscular toughness completely irrelevant.
So we've seen this philosophy conquer continents, and we've seen it dominate the boxing ring. But let's bring it even closer to home. We promise to decode how this works in modern daily life.
Let's do it.
What happens when we take the Blitzkrieg strategy out of the realm of physical violence entirely? How does this apply to diplomacy, office politics, or like a high-stakes negotiation?
The underlying psychology remains exactly the same.
Really?
Yeah. When you surprise people with sudden, decisive action in a corporate or political setting, you force them to act before they are fully oriented.
So they can't do the whole circle back thing?
Exactly. They can't respond with their usual cautious, bureaucratic delays. They get emotional, they react imprudently, and they make massive, unforced errors.
Who's a good example of this?
Let's look at a master of this in the political arena, Julius Caesar.
Caesar is famous for the phrase, Veni, vidi, vici, I came, I saw, I conquered.
Right.
But his real genius wasn't just swinging a sword in Gaul. It was how he manipulated the Roman Senate. How did he use unpredictability in a political setting?
He weaponized the unexpected
Okay.
to completely freeze his political opponents.
Okay.
The Roman Senate was a highly structured, deeply traditional, and predictable world. Everyone knew the unwritten rules of alliances and feuds.
Very rigid.
Right. Caesar would constantly break that script. For example, he might suddenly, without any warning, form a very public and powerful alliance with the senator's most bitter, lifelong enemy.
Oh, wow. So imagine you're a powerful senator. You wake up one morning, you go to the forum, and you find out that the guy you've been feuding with for a decade is now backed by Caesar's immense wealth and military influence. You are completely blindsided. You have no time to strategize with your own allies. You're forced into a corner. You either have to completely abandon your opposition and submit, or you have to risk an immediate, highly dangerous confrontation that you just haven't prepared for.
And Caesar would use the inverse tactic just as effectively.
What do you mean?
The standard political procedure after defeating a rival in a civil conflict was exile, execution, or stripping them of their wealth.
Right, crush them completely.
But Caesar would defeat a bitter enemy and then completely unexpectedly, publicly pardon them. He would restore their property and sometimes even offer them a position.
Wow. Caught entirely off guard by this sudden show of extreme clemency, the rivals' psychological defenses would just collapse.
Exactly.
They didn't know how to fight someone who's being kind to them.
No.
I often became fiercely loyal allies. Caesar's mere reputation for doing the unpredictable made everyone around him hyper-cautious, constantly second-guessing themselves, which ironically made them even slower and easier for him to outmaneuver.
It's the political equivalent of Ali's punch.
Totally.
Let's look at another historical titan, Napoleon Bonaparte. He used speed specifically against the weakness of divided leadership.
Napoleon frequently faced massive coalitions, right? Armies made up of allied forces from different nations, like the Russians and the Austrians trying to work together.
Yeah.
And the problem with a coalition is that the generals all have to agree on a strategy before they can move an inch.
Exactly. It's committee-style leadership.
The worst kind.
It's inherently slow because it requires consensus. It's the ultimate rigid defense.
So how did Napoleon blitzkrieg a committee?
He realized he didn't need to destroy the entire massive army at once. He just needed to drive a wedge into the coalition's slow decision-making process.
Okay.
He would launch a lightning-fast, highly concentrated strike against a specific point in their lines. The suddenness of the attack created massive, immediate pressure.
And under extreme pressure, diplomacy completely breaks down.
Precisely. Because they didn't have time to hold a polite meeting to discuss a counter-strategy, the Allied generals would panic.
You start pointing fingers.
Yeah, exactly. They would start blaming each other for the breach. The Austrian general would accuse the Russian general of failing to support him. They would issue conflicting panicked orders to their troops.
What a mess.
Napoleon's speed turned minor internal dissension into total catastrophic collapse.
You see the exact same dynamic in the corporate world all the time.
Oh, everywhere.
If a nimble startup suddenly launches a disruptive product that completely shifts the market overnight, a massive legacy corporation with divided bureaucratic leadership will often just tear itself apart. The board members will spend weeks arguing over whose department is to blame for missing the trend, rather than actually mobilizing a response to the threat.
The diplomatic equivalent of this is also fascinating.
Let's hear it.
If we look at the negotiating tactics of Henry Kissinger, the former U.S. Secretary of State, we see an absolute masterclass in the diplomatic slow, quick.
How do you blitzkrieg a peace treaty? I mean, you're sitting in a conference room not riding a horse.
You do it by manipulating the opponent's perception of time.
Interesting.
Kissinger would intentionally drag out the early stages of a high-stakes negotiation. He would employ deliberate slowness.
So he's setting the trap.
Right. He would spend days, sometimes weeks, engaging in incredibly slow, bland, almost boring banter. He'd discuss minor procedural details, the shape of the table, the schedule of coffee breaks.
He's playing the role of the retreating Mongol army.
Exactly.
He's getting the opposing diplomats to lower their guard. They start thinking, oh, this is going to be a long, easy, comfortable process.
He lulls them into a sleepy, comfortable rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Then, right as the absolute deadline for the talks approached, literally hours before everyone's flights were scheduled to leave, and the talks would be declared a failure, Kissinger would suddenly drop a massive, highly complex list of major demands on the table.
Quick.
He in with the quick.
And because they had spent weeks coasting on this slow, comfortable rhythm, their brains couldn't immediately shift gears to process this massive influx of complex information.
No, they couldn't.
The deadline is screaming in their ears. They don't have the cognitive runway to step back, consult their home governments, and analyze the demands properly.
Right.
They panic about being blamed for failing the negotiation entirely, so they make massive concessions they never would have agreed to if they had time to think.
We can also see this strategy used not just against an adversary, but to completely change the psychology of an entire nation.
Oh, wow, like what?
Let's look at the political application by Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1932.
This is a phenomenal example because it shows how speed generates public momentum. Set the scene. FDR is elected president at the absolute lowest point of the Great Depression. The country is economically devastated. Banks are failing every single day. Unemployment is staggering, and the public is terrified.
Right.
Between his election in November and his inauguration in March, the country is desperate for reassurance. And what does FDR do?
He essentially disappears from the public stage.
He goes silent.
He institutes a deliberate slow. He creates a massive void of information. For months, the public and the press hear almost nothing from him about his specific plans. The stillness is palpable. It creates a sense of deep unease and intense suspense.
Then comes Inauguration Day. The lull breaks.
The quick begins.
He steps up to the podium and delivers one of the most rousing, energetic speeches in American history. The famous, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself address.
Yeah.
He instantly, violently changes the tempo. And he doesn't just give a good speech, he immediately launches into what becomes known as the first 100 days. He hits Congress fast and furiously with a relentless barrage of bold, incredibly complex legislative proposals. Bank holidays, massive public works programs, total economic overhauls.
The psychological impact of that sudden shift was staggering.
It had to be.
If he had just rolled out those policies slowly, one by one over his first year, they would have been debated, picked apart by critics, and stalled by opposition in Congress.
Just normal politics?
Right. But because of the slow setup, the sudden explosion of action felt intensely dramatic. It proved to the public that he had been meditating deeply on the issues during his silence. The sheer velocity of his actions created a massive bandwagon effect.
People admire boldness. When they see a leader moving with that kind of decisive, overwhelming speed, they assume he knows exactly where he is going and they desperately want to follow.
Exactly.
The momentum of the strategy itself bypassed the typical political gridlock and generated the public confidence needed to actually start turning the economy around. It's the psychological equivalent of catching the entire nation off guard, but in a way that inspires them rather than terrifies them.
However, there is a crucial trap here when we talk about modern applications of speed.
Oh.
It's a trap that many organizations and individuals fall into today.
Right. Let me ask a pivotal question here.
Okay.
Because we live in an era of unparalleled technology. We have instant global communication, real-time data tracking, cloud computing.
Mm-hmm.
If speed is the ultimate weapon, doesn't modern technology give whoever has the most advanced gadgets the ultimate advantage? Doesn't my smartphone and my data analytics dashboard make me the modern equivalent of Genghis Khan?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the answer is a resounding no.
Really?
In fact, technology can often be the exact thing that destroys your speed.
How is that possible?
True nimbleness requires superior coordination and the ability to make clear decisions quickly. It does not simply mean gathering more data.
Right.
To illustrate this paradox, we have to look at the Vietnam War.
This is a fascinating historical counterpoint.
It really is.
You have the U.S. military, equipped with the most advanced communication technology, radar, helicopters, and computing power available in the world at the time.
Yeah.
And you have the North Vietnamese, who are operating with vastly inferior technology, often relying on foot couriers.
Mm-hmm.
By the logic of the modern corporate world, the U.S. should have been able to process information and move infinitely faster.
But the exact opposite happened.
Yeah.
The U.S. military was actually hindered quite severely by its superior communications.
Too much of a good thing.
Exactly. Because they had the unprecedented ability to transmit massive amounts of data from the deepest jungle all the way back to command centers in Saigon or even Washington, D.C. They did exactly that.
Right.
They generated exhaustive reports on everything.
Right.
Enemy movements, body counts, supply levels.
But all that information created a massive processing bottleneck.
Yeah.
The generals had so much data pouring in that they couldn't make a decision until they had analyzed all of it. They fell completely back into the rigid defense mindset because the sheer volume of information demanded committees, review boards, and endless slide briefings.
Their technology paralyzed their OD loop.
Unbelievable.
Meanwhile, the North Vietnamese relied on a highly decentralized, low-tech network. Because they didn't have the luxury of sending terabytes of data back to a central server to wait for permission, their local leaders in the field were empowered to make immediate, tactical decisions based on what they saw directly in front of them.
They were just agile.
They didn't rely on gadgetry,
Right.
They relied on human nimbleness. As a result, they could react to the changing reality of the battlefield vastly quicker than the technologically superior American forces. True speed is cognitive, not technological.
That is such a crucial takeaway for anyone working in a data-driven industry today.
Absolutely.
If your technology forces you to spend 3 weeks analyzing a dashboard before you can make a pivot, you aren't moving fast. You are just meticulously, scientifically documenting your own paralysis.
Precisely. Which brings us to the ultimate question of this entire philosophy.
It's that.
We've spent this deep dive exploring how to wield the Blitzkrieg strategy. We've seen how to organize chaotic speed, how to set the slow trap, and how to execute the unanticipated blow. But warfare, business, and life are interactive. What happens when you find yourself on the receiving end?
Right. What is the reversal here? If someone, a rival company, an aggressive colleague, a political opponent, starts executing a slow, quick strategy against you, how do you actually survive?
Yeah, how do you counter it?
The Shah of Khwarizm and the Allied forces in 1940 proved definitively that setting up a massive static wall and hoping for the best is a recipe for total disaster.
Historically, there are really only two ways to survive this. The first defense is straightforward in theory, but incredibly difficult in practice. If you are attacked by a fast enemy, the only true defense is to be as fast or faster. Only speed can truly neutralize speed.
So you just have to outrun them.
You cannot afford to absorb the blow and then plan your counterattack in a committee meeting. You have to preempt their momentum with your own rapid, fluid movements. You have to be willing to abandon your rigid plans entirely the moment the landscape shifts.
And the second defense, what if you simply don't have the resources to be faster than them?
Then you have to weaponize the slow against them.
I'll reverse the trap.
If you sense an aggressive opponent is trying to build momentum, you use deliberate slowness as your own trap. You appear incredibly slow, overly deliberate, perhaps even a little foolish or disorganized. You let them think they are moving much faster and smarter than you are.
You play the role of the haggard Mongol army retreating in the Fergana Valley. You feed their arrogance.
Exactly. You infect the aggressive enemy with a sleepy, overconfident attitude.
Yeah.
Because they think you are paralyzed, They will drop their guard and likely overextend themselves in their rush to destroy you. And once they are overextended, deeply committed to their high-speed maneuver and out over their skis, that is when you strike with your own unexpected blow from the side. You let their own velocity pull them off balance.
So what does this all mean? Let's recap the core mission for everyone listening today.
Good idea.
We live in a world that is frantic, distracting, and ironically, deeply cautious. Most people are terrified of making a mistake, so they build psychological walls and retreat into rigid defenses.
Yeah.
To separate yourself from the pack, you cannot just run faster on the same treadmill. You have to be organized and strategic.
You must master the tempo.
Exactly. Scan your environment for weakness, just like the Germans scanning the Ardennes forest. Use meticulous preparation and deliberate slowness to get your opponents to lower their guard.
Let them underestimate you.
And then, when the time is right, hit them with sudden, terrifying speed from an entirely unanticipated angle. Don't hit them with the hardest punch. Hit them with the punch they don't see coming.
But as we close this analysis, I want to leave you with a final, perhaps unsettling question to mull over.
Okay, lay it on us.
We've established that speed, when harnessed correctly, is the ultimate weapon in overcoming resistance. And we just discussed that the only true defense against a fast opponent is to be even faster.
Right. Speed neutralizes speed.
But if we connect that reality to the bigger picture of our modern society, does this inevitably lock us all into an entirely unsustainable arms race of velocity?
Oh, wow.
In our personal lives, our careers, our technologies, if everyone is constantly trying to blitzkrieg everyone else, constantly trying to bypass each other's cognitive defenses, at what point does the sheer compounding momentum of modern life force the entire system to crash?
That's a heavy thought. If the only way to survive the treadmill is to make the treadmill spin faster, perhaps the ultimate strategic victory isn't found in winning the race.
Right.
Is there perhaps a hidden, undiscovered power in simply choosing to step off the battlefield entirely?
It raises an important question about what we are actually racing toward.
And suddenly, that feeling of moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour while staying completely stationary doesn't just feel like an illusion. It feels like the trap we've all collectively built for ourselves.
Exactly.
It all comes back to that besieged fortress we talked about at the very beginning. Maybe the answer isn't building higher walls or building faster siege engines. Maybe the answer is realizing that we hold the keys to the gate.